All right. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, or whatever time it is where you're tuning in from. Whether it's 2 p.m. or it's midnight for you, we're all super excited to welcome you to Youth Economics Initiative's flagship competition, EconOlympiad. My name is Henry. I'm the co-founder here at the YEI. On behalf of the entire team, I'd like to thank you all for participating in this competition. EconOlympiad is hosted with the Wen and Young Family Foundation with financial support from WE, the Smart and Vital Charitable Foundation, and Flex College Prep. Now, without further ado, Cheryl, our VP of Events, will be going through some norms and rules. Good luck, everyone.
Once again, welcome. And before we get started, let's go over some norms. So the first one is just to have your camera on throughout the duration of this competition. This has to do with like proctoring for the exam, as well as just making sure that the whole event is more pleasant. So please keep it on throughout the written exam and also through the speaker seminar afterwards. Second thing is if you have a question or comment, please raise your hand in the participants window. We will call on you and unmute you to speak. So after like each segment, there will be a little Q&A section. And the third thing is to keep the chat appropriate. It's off right now, but we will be turning it on when Professor Dix-Carneiro from Duke comes to talk to us. That said, if it does become distracting, we will have to turn it off. Additionally, if you make inappropriate comments, we might have to remove you from this competition. Third thing is about naming. So if you haven't done this already, please change your name to match the format. Team number, first name, and the last name. Just put your team number in front. You don't need to put like team, parentheses, or anything else, just the number. And the name you need to put has to be the same one that you register with. You can change your name by clicking on the three dots on the upper right-hand corner of your video thumbnail and selecting rename. If you don't know what your team number is, you can find it in the spreadsheet in the chat. It only has the team captains listed, but you can find the team numbers the same for the whole team. So just find your team captain, and then you can find your team number. And the fourth thing is to be respectful to other competitors as well as the proctors and our guest speaker. Thank you in advance for following these norms. Before we go over the agenda, our co-founder and president is here to introduce our mission and organization.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Before we begin today, I wanted to officially welcome you to our first annual EconOlympiad. Over the past 3 years, Youth Economics Initiative has strived to serve the student community with engaging and fun economics opportunities. When I co-founded YEI, my hope was to build a pathway for other high school students to explore their passion, not alone, but together with other students who are just as passionate, as motivated, and as brilliant as they are. That has been our mission here at YEI ever since. Our first step toward that dream was creating our Econ Clubs program. In 2018, both Henry and I noticed that economics pathways and experiences for high schoolers were pretty much non-existent. Even though economics is one of the top 5 most studied majors in college, many of our peers didn't understand economics at all. Was it about making money, or maybe about stocks? For most students, economics was just about as abstract, confusing, and dull as any subject could get. We set out to change that by bringing together students passionate about economics and empowering them to learn through curriculum and competition, spread their knowledge to their peers, and make a lasting impact on their community. Our network of over 50 economics clubs at schools in 10 plus countries from all over the world serves to connect students and build an energetic and driven community of young economists. We offer our students a portfolio of over 60 weeks in in-depth curriculum, ranging from macro and microeconomics to personal financial literacy. Our YEI Econ Talks give members a chance to connect with industry professionals, award-winning academics, Nobel Prize winners, and business leaders. And through our Flip volunteering program in partnership with Bank of America, we empower our student leaders to educate their communities and make a real difference. Our mission yesterday, today, and tomorrow is to empower high schoolers with the tools they need to become future leaders, economists, and entrepreneurs. Today's EconOlympiad competition aims to do just that. While we already offer our flagship annual Econ Bowl every fall, we wanted to look beyond quiz bowls and multiple choice exams and build a competition unique to our vision of empowering students. With many high school economics competitions and programs being extremely railroaded and simply requiring the regurgitation of information, we wanted to create a competition that would require critical thinking and real-world application of economics, rather than just hard memorization. Over the past year, our staff team has been hard at work, making this opportunity possible for all of you. From the dozens of late night emails and meetings to the scramble of deadlines and plans, I wanted to take this time to thank all of you and all of our wonderful YEI staff members for putting their heart into this amazing opportunity and giving us all a chance to see it come to fruition. Thank you to our partner, the Wen and Young Family Foundation, for supporting our journey and co-hosting this event with us. Thanks to our event sponsors and supporters, Flex College Prep, and Smart and Final. And thanks to our organization partners and sponsors, the Foundation for Economic Education and the Foundation for Teaching Economics. And of course, thank you to all of you for competing. The past year has been a whirlwind of emotions, and we can't wait to engage and learn with all of you in person. But for today, it's our honor and privilege to welcome you to the first annual EconOlympiad. Good luck with the synchronous first stage today, and now Cheryl will be taking back over and quickly covering today's agenda and prize.
Yeah, so all times on the slide here are in Pacific Daylight Time. Right now, we're in the opening ceremony. And during the opening ceremony, we'll essentially give you some information about the competition and testing, and they'll be taking any question that you guys have. And then for teams 51 through 90, you will need to leave the Zoom meeting and then join a second Zoom meeting right after the Q&A. The Zoom link for that will be sent out later in the Zoom chat, as well as to your email inboxes later. And if we have time, we'll be taking a short break once we are in the separate Zoom meetings. And then at 9:45, the written round test will start. So this will happen in the separate Zoom meetings. And then if you are in the second Zoom meeting, which is once again, teams 51 through 90, you'll take your test in the second Zoom meeting. And after you are done with your test, you will come back to this meeting because the rest of our event will be happening in this main Zoom meeting. And if your number is between 11 and 50, you'll just stay in this meeting and take your test here. And after the written exam, we'll come back for a speaker seminar with Professor Dix-Carneiro from Duke. He'll be talking about the effects of globalization today. And then finally, at around 11:30 a.m., we'll be giving some closing remarks and announcing the presentation prompt. So be sure to stay. Now let's move on to the EconOlympiad prizes. Throughout our first annual EconOlympiad, you'll have a shot at earning over $2,000 in prizes by applying your economics knowledge and winning big. Our title is 1,150 cash prize pool is brought to you by We, a leading e-grocer that serves to make affordable, high-quality Asian and Hispanic produce and products easily accessible to families across the United States. And the additional $600 total in vouchers is graciously provided by Flex College Prep, an education consulting company that provides services like college admissions consulting, test prep, subject tutoring, and academic enrichment classes to middle and high school students. This year, our first place team will win $500 in cash with an additional $200 in Flex College Prep vouchers that can be redeemed towards the different summer academic programs provided by Flex that is taking place in a couple of months. And our second place team will win $400 in cash with an additional $200 Flex College Prep voucher as well. And finally, our third place team will win $250 in cash with an additional $200 in Flex College Prep vouchers. In addition to our grand prize pool, all of you have already automatically been entered into an overall raffle to win Apple AirPods, courtesy of our co-host, the Wang and Yang Family Foundation. You can receive additional raffle entries by participating in social media challenge, which you can find out more about on our Instagram, the.yei, and Dia will be telling you a little bit more about it after our written exam. The raffle winner will be announced after the final awards ceremony on our Instagram. Best of luck, and I look forward to seeing what all of you can do. Next, Ian will be taking it back and giving you some more details about the competition.
As you probably know by now, EconOlympiad will take place over 3 weeks in 2 stages. The first stage of EconOlympiad is a team-based free response question segment, where teams are given 45 minutes to answer 4 written free response questions, covering micro and macroeconomics. You will be taking this section synchronously today in the next couple of minutes. The second round is a presentation round, where teams are given 1 week to create and record a 10-minute presentation, solving a given prompt that will be judged by our select panel of NYU and UC San Diego professors. The presentation round prompt will be given to all teams after every team has completed the written round of the exam at the end of this Zoom meeting. You will have until April 9th at 11:59 Pacific Daylight Time, UTC-7, to submit your presentations to the exam portal. Each round is worth 50 points, and the cumulative score from both rounds will determine your team's final placement. All awards and placement will be announced during a final awards ceremony on April 17th at 9 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Today, you'll be taking part in the first part of EconOlympiad, the written round. It is a 4-question closed note 45-minute test. The questions are all free response, and some questions require you to take a picture of your work and upload it to the testing portal. The questions will cover both macro and microeconomics. Responses will be scored on a points-based rubric, similar to the AP macro and microeconomics exam grading system. This has been reviewed by our judges and can be found on our website. There are no penalties for incorrect answers, and you will not be able to go back to a question that you have already submitted. So please plan accordingly. To begin the test today, following this brief opening ceremony, you and your team should head immediately to the breakout room with your respective team number. If you do not know your team number, please check your email now to ensure that you have the correct number and you arrive at the correct breakout room once the test begins. Once all of your team members have arrived in the correct room, your assigned YEI proctor will arrive to help you get started. Please do not start the test until your proctor has arrived. During this time, there may also be a small 5 to 10 minute delay as your proctors are also working with other teams. We ask that you cooperate with us throughout this process, and we thank you for your patience. However, if your proctor has still not arrived by 10:10 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, we ask that your team captain return to the main room for immediate assistance. First thing, you will not be able to go back to a question once you've moved on to the next questions. You will be able to see one question at a time. Each question will have a text option and an option for a file upload. The text submission is required and the file upload is optional. During the test, each team captain will share their screen, which allows all members of the team to see and answer the questions. All answers must be directly typed and submitted by the team captain through the testing portal. Going to other breakout rooms is strictly prohibited. For all diagrams and models, please either draw them through the Zoom whiteboard feature and take a screenshot, or on paper and then digitally scan into the submission portal. Throughout the duration of the exam, your YEI staff proctor will be regularly checking in with you and your team, both to answer any questions you may have and to ensure the integrity of the test. A full list of test integrity instructions will be reviewed in a couple of minutes. If you have any questions at any time, use the Ask for Help button on Zoom, which you can find on the bottom bar. If it is urgent, please have one person, preferably your team captain, return to the main room so that we can assist you in a timely manner. Now let's go over how to access the test. The test link will be sent to the team captains once breakout rooms open through email. After the captain enters their first name, last name, and email address, you may begin the test by clicking Begin once your test proctor has covered all the information with you. Make sure your team is completely ready before you start the test. Once you click Begin, the timer will start. Before you reach the questions, you will be asked to agree to all our rules, which we are currently explaining, and to type in your team number, so please have that ready. After that, complete the test. EconOlympiad is committed to providing equitable and secure competition environment, and I'm going to hand off to Jessica. One of our event coordinators will be covering our integrity policy.
Hi guys, I'm Jessica, and I'm one of the event coordinators here. I'll be briefly going over some integrity rules for the exam portion, which you guys should hopefully already be familiar with. The first and most important rule is that you cannot use external resources. This includes the internet, your textbooks, notes, friends who aren't part of your team, and smart speakers as well. When taking the test, please use your judgment as we don't want to have to disqualify any teams. The second rule, as Cheryl mentioned earlier, is that you must have your camera on at all times, and it should show you and your workspace if possible. The third rule is that you must keep your mic on as well. You'll be in a room with your teammates and occasionally the proctor, so you don't have to worry about having loud background noise. And the fourth and last rule is that the captain or the one who's screen sharing should always be entering the exam. No one else can type. We know that most of you won't be consulting external resources, but these are just policies in place to discourage cheating and maintain the fairness of the competition. So now we'll be moving on to Q&A. If anyone has any questions, you can raise your virtual hand and we'll unmute you.
Okay, so now, sorry if I butchered that question.
I don't think anybody in my team so far has come yet, so I'm not sure what to do.
Okay, so could you contact your team? Maybe they're still asleep. So I would do that. And then other thing is I would just contact them and see what's up. And then what you could do is you could take the exam yourself and they could join you for the presentation if they couldn't make it.
Okay.
Since you're here. Oliver, what's your question?
So for the parts of the test that are required to be written, are we writing any of it on paper, or is it all going to be through Zoom whiteboard?
So there's part of it that you can just type up right into the portal. And then some of the questions also have, like, they ask you to draw a diagram or something like that. So you have two options. You can do the Zoom whiteboard if you find that easier, or if you find it easier to just do it on paper, you could do that as well. So that's totally up to you. But if you do it on paper, you need to like be able to scan it up and then like upload it into the portal. So that is like consideration. Okay, any other questions? Jack, what's your question?
Sarah, can you check the chat?
Oh, so I think Jack is asking about when the test will begin. So the test will begin we'll open all the breakout rooms at exactly 9:45. And then so you will have to wait for your proctors to come. So if you have to, you say you have to leave at 10:30. So I can make a note for your team 58, right? Yeah, I'll ask your proctors to come to your room first since you have to leave soon. So the test is 45 minutes long. So if you end up starting at like 9:50, you might not be able to stay for the whole thing, but I think it's probably okay if your like team just handles the last 5 minutes or so. So you'll be able to be there for most of it. You just have to might leave a little bit early, or you guys have to finish the test a little bit earlier. Yeah. And then I have some other questions in the chat. One person's asking if we're doing this competition individually, we don't have to screen share, right? No, you do have to screen share. This has to do with like proctoring, so we make sure you're not like on other tabs. So even if you're doing that individually, you need to screen share. And then one person's asking, internet might be bad and cut out. So if that is the case, I think for mostly, I would have someone else be the one that's like typing the answers into the portal, and not have it be you. If you do like lag out, I don't think there's too much we can do about that. I would just try to get back on as soon as possible and then try to like not miss much of the test. Okay. Dennis, what's your question?
So yeah, I know we have 45 minutes to complete the questions. Is there like a bonus for finishing them faster, or is it just if total completion and quality of the answers that matters?
Tyrion, do you want to answer this one?
Yeah, so there is no bonus for finishing the test quickly. So yeah, just try to get as many as right as you can in the allotted amount.
Yeah. Nadia, what's your question?
Yeah, so my question was, if we have the portal where you would answer the questions, the team captain is the only one that's going to be answering them, and the other people on the team are able to write down things, and they can show it throughout the screen, but the team captain is the only one actually answering and submitting everything, including the written portions.
So I think what should be happening is your team captain will have the test up, and then you can all see the questions, and then you guys would like discuss like what you guys think the answer is. And then yeah, the team captain is the only one that can like physically like type in the answers. Yeah.
All right, that makes sense. Thank you so much.
The portal also does not allow like copy and pasting, so you can't like type it up on a different platform. So just make sure to type it right into the portal. And then about the link to the portal, that will be sent later. So right before we open the breakout rooms, we'll send the link to the portal, so you'll get that then. And also in the email with like the Zoom link, it'll also include the link to the portal in case like you get logged off or you can't find it on Zoom or something. Sorry if I'm butchering your names. Fatima, what's your question?
It's Fatima, it's fine.
Oh, Fatima.
So if our team captain's absent for this part, is it okay if one of us takes his place for this round?
Yeah, just make sure to tell your proctor.
Okay.
That's fine. Yeah, so the proctors will all be taking attendance, so they'll note down like, oh, who's missing and all that. Okay. So Pranay or like someone asked like, how do we answer the questions? So I think we kind of already went over this, but basically you pull up the portal and if you've seen some of our practice tests, it's pretty much the same system. So you go in there and there's like a couple like your name, you have to type in your name. And this should be like the team captain and then your email, and then I'll ask for your team number. So make sure you have that ready. And then they'll have a little text box where you can type in your answers. Each question will have a text box and a file upload. So you can, the parts that are not like a graph or something, like you type up your answer, and then for the graphs, you can have it on Zoom whiteboard or write it up and then scan it. And the portal takes most common testing, like photo or PDF files. Should be good on that. Someone asked, is there a tiebreaker system? So essentially, like, Darian, do you want to explain this?
Yeah. So as it's a grade on a rubric, it's very unlikely that there will be ties. So if that happens, we'll take it on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah. And even if there are ties for the written round, there won't be any ties for the judge presentation. So then like in the for like the overall scores, there won't be any like ties because of how like judging works. It's like, yeah. So even if there's ties here, there won't be ties for the presentation. Someone asked, how can you find what your teammates are? I think your club officer should have communicated that to you if you registered through a club. So I would check there, see if your club officer sent any communication to you about that. And maybe about team number, check the email you got on Friday and see what number that was. That should be your team number, and it should match what is on the doc spreadsheet I sent. Joshua, what's your question?
Yes. So I remember in the emails that you sent out, there was a demo for the flexi quiz thing. And I was just wondering, since in the demo, the guy who did the demo already had an account set up. So are we supposed to have an account set up with flexi quiz before this?
So the guy in the video, which is Darian, he doesn't actually have an account set up. It's not a login or anything. I know it might appear that way. It's just like asking for your name and then like your email. It's not a login or anything. It's like you just put it in. That's it. It's like a form. Yeah.
So if I have nothing set up yet, that's totally fine.
Yeah, definitely. You should not have anything set up.
Okay, thank you.
Set up. Does anyone else have any questions? Last questions. All right. So I think we got through all the questions for now, but definitely let us or your proctors know if you have any more questions going forward. My bad. So now we'll be going to our separate Zoom calls, and we'll be taking a short break before the actual exam break starts. So if you're in team 51 through 90, we will have a second Zoom call again where you will be taking the written test. So you'll take your break once you get there. When you join, please remember to rename yourself again with the team number in front of your full name. And after you've finished your test, please return to this Zoom call as we'll be hosting the rest of EconOlympiad here. If you are in those teams, which is 51 through 90 again, please join the Zoom right now. The link is on the slides and it's also been sent in the chat. You'll also get the second Zoom link in an important links email to your inbox at 9:40 a.m. Pacific time today in case you get logged off of Zoom. So once again, the Zoom link is theyei.org/Zoom2 for the second call. And then if you don't fall under those teams, which is 11 through 50, please stay on this call and you'll be testing here. So once again, if you're in team 51 through 90, please log off of this call and go to the second Zoom call now.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Shrishti, one of the event coordinators here. Congrats on finishing the first portion of EconOlympiad. We'll be now moving on to our speaker keynote featuring Professor Dix-Carneiro from Duke University. Professor Dix-Carneiro received his PhD in economics from Princeton University and has his work published in the Journal of Economics and American Economic Journal. His research specializes in international trade, labor markets, and economic development. Before we get started, I would like to go over how questions and discussions will be facilitated today. During the presentation or after, if you have any questions, please send me a private message. I'll ask them on your behalf at the end of the presentation. Please keep your questions and messages appropriate, or else we may have to remove you from the competition. Now, without further ado, please welcome Professor Dix-Carneiro.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever you are. Pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the organizers for the invitation. And thank you everyone for being here with me for the next 20 or 30 minutes. So let me share my screen so that I can start my presentation. All right, here it is. So today I'm going to be talking about understanding anti-trade sentiment. And the reason why I'm talking about this is that, I mean, it took me a while to decide the topic of this talk. I spoke a little bit with the organizers about what exactly should it be. And we settled that it should be something accessible to high school students, but also related to my own work. So I thought that was a good topic for me to share with everyone. So let's start with a few current issues that you might be familiar with, given that you have accompanied what has been going on in the media, in the newspapers, on the TV. And so we know that there has been a growing anti-trade sentiment, okay? And that has been particularly reflected in the views during the 2016 presidential race. And the sentiment has actually been solidified during the Trump administration, okay? And this anti-trade sentiment really follows from the belief that trade with China in particular were responsible for millions of job losses over the past decade or so. Okay, so that's the focus. The focus here is going to be on the effects of trade with China, but also there has been concern also over NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement that was signed in the 1990s, as well as offshoring, this phenomenon where firms more and more conduct tasks and business offshore in other countries. Okay, and there's also this view that the United States have been sustaining persistent trade deficits for more than 2 decades, and that is perceived by the public as the U.S. not necessarily winning from trade, but rather losing. So a lot of the current debate is actually a consequence that globalization, or trade openness, if you wish, leads to winners, but it also leads to losers, okay? And it turns out that the losses from globalization, the losses from trade, tend to be very concentrated, okay? So for example, once you have a factory closing because of import competition, you know, it's all of the workers within that factory that lose their jobs. So it's easy for these workers to get politically organized and make some noise and protest against trade. Okay? And more generally and more broadly, you can think about whole industries being affected by import competition from China. For instance, in the US, the toys and textiles manufacturing industries have been very hard hit by trade with China, so that it is easier for these agents to be politically organized and protest against globalization or trade. On the other hand, if you think about the gains from trade, usually they tend to be very widespread and indirect. Okay, so for instance, we all benefit from trade with China when we go to Walmart and we see this very cheap t-shirt. We all benefit from it. Okay, but the amount of gain that accrued to each of us is relatively small. When we sum these gains across all of the US population, these gains are huge. But it's not because I'm able to buy a cheaper t-shirt on Walmart that I'm gonna go to DC in front of the White House with a sign, you know, keep tariffs low, right? So these gains tend to be very widespread. They tend to be small for each one of us individually. So the other source of gain is actually very indirect and very hard to observe, which I'm going to be talking about in the next few slides. Trade can lead to very important productivity gains for firms, okay? And this also makes these gains from trade quite indirect. So it makes it hard for political organization to favor trade. Okay, let me put it this way. And if you see on the news, you're going to see that anti-trade proponents, they usually tend to emphasize the cost side of trade, okay? And there have been a stream of recent papers in the academic literature really emphasizing the cost side of trade with China when we look at the US labor market specifically, okay? And on the other hand, the benefits of trade tend to be much harder to measure, okay? Usually, if you want to fully measure the benefits of trade, you need a reasonably sophisticated economic model. We need very good data. And typically, it is quite hard to establish causality, okay? So that in the end of the day, if a journalist comes to an economist, the journalist is going to be very compelled by the evidence on the cost of trade, but it's very hard for economists to really distill the benefits of trade in an easy way to journalists. So this benefit side is very often lost in translation. So what I have prepared here for you guys in the next few minutes is we're going to be reviewing a few sources of the benefits from trade, and then I'm going to be contrasting these benefits from trade to some of the costs from trade, okay? And then we're going to go to a real-world application where I'm going to be telling you what has been the effect of China on the US labor market, okay? So the first big benefit of trade comes from what we call recording gains from trade. Okay, so these are gains from specialization. Okay, so you may have heard versions of these gains. You probably have seen on YouTube this guy trying to make a chicken sandwich from scratch. Okay, and that illustrates the gains from trade. If you try to make a chicken sandwich from scratch, if you try to plant your own wheat to make the bread, if you try to raise your own chicken, and so on and so forth, you're going to be able to consume less chicken sandwiches and less of everything else if you just specialized in doing something and bought all of the other ingredients in the market, right? So this is a good example of these comparative advantage gains from trade. You specialize in what you do best, okay? And then you trade with other countries or with other people, okay? So that you're able to increase your consumption, not only yours, but also of your other trade partners, okay? So this is one classic source of gains from trade. There are other sources of gains from trade, and here, as you see, as I'm going through these gains, these sources of gains from trade, I'm always going to be citing here some articles with evidence for these benefits, okay? So the other interesting benefit from trade is that competition that arises with trade tends to push the least efficient firms out of the market, okay? And in turn, resources, workers are freed away from these less efficient firms, and they're then reallocated to more efficient firms. And that allows the economy as a whole to produce more with the same amount of workers. But you can also see increases in productivity, even at the firm level. So the argument that I just said is just a composition type of argument where the least productive firms exit the market, okay? The most productive firms keep producing, but they absorb some of these workers that have been freed by these less efficient firms. But there's also some evidence out there that trade can increase productivity at the firm level as well. Each firm becomes more productive, okay? So one such argument is that trade, by leading to specialization, leads firms to produce more. And when firms produce more, they're able to reap increasing returns to scale. They're able to reap economies of scale. And by producing more, the average cost of production goes down, which effectively means that they're more efficient, they're more productive. Firms can also become more productive because of trade, because with access to cheaper inputs, they're able to buy more inputs that makes their workers more productive. And finally, we have this, apologies. And finally, we have this other mechanism that is quite interesting, right? So if the government has a structure of protection in place that diverts incentives for firms to invest in productivity and innovation, and rather that gives motives for firms to send bureaucrats, lobbyists to DC to keep negotiating that trade protection to be kept in place, right? So all of these arguments here suggest that trade can actually have also a very direct effect on productivity at the firm level, okay? There's also some evidence that trade leads to increases in foreign competition because of trade can lead to domestic market power being reduced, so that even domestic firms will have to reduce their prices to make up for that foreign competition. And then finally, there has also been quite a bit of work showing that international trade increases the number of varieties available to an economy, and that this increase in the number of varieties is beneficial for consumers. Okay, now that we reviewed the main sources of benefits from trade, let me tell you a little bit about the bad side of trade, okay? So the international trade theory, the economic theory is already pretty clear that international trade, trade openness, trade liberalization episodes can lead to winners, but also it can lead to losers. Not everyone benefits from trade, okay? So trade can have quite important inequality effects within a country, okay? And economists tend to think about short-run losers versus long-run losers, okay? What are the losers in the short run, 1 or 2 years after a trade liberalization episode, versus the long-run losers, the losers that are characterized after 10 or 15 years, okay? And it turns out that these losers can be quite different, okay? So in the short run, it's industry affiliation that matters, okay? Workers and entrepreneurs in the textile industry versus workers and entrepreneurs in electronics. So in the US, we tend to think about sectors like textiles, very hard hit by import competition from China. We think about workers and entrepreneurs in these sectors as being losing, from that relationship. On the other hand, sectors where the U.S. has a comparative advantage, whereas where the U.S. tends to be an exporter, okay, such as electronics, workers and entrepreneurs in these sectors tend to be winners. That is in the short run. In the long run, though, it's not the type of industry where you're initially working in, but rather the type of factor that characterizes winners and losers. Okay, so in the long run, we tend to think about unskilled workers in the U.S. as losers from trade, and skilled workers as gainers, as winners from trade. Okay, so there's already kind of quite a bit of evidence that changes in the trade environment can lead to substantial disruptions in the labor market. Okay, so as the trade environment changes, some jobs are destroyed, new jobs are created. Okay, but in practice, what we see is that workers tend to have a very hard time transitioning from these industries that are declining because of trade towards these industries that are expanding because of trade. And because of this very hard transition, what do we see for many workers? We see temporarily low wages, unemployment, and worse labor market conditions. Okay. Now, as I said at the beginning of the talk, losers tend to make a lot of noise. Okay, because losses are concentrated, it is easy to get politically organized and to make the message come across. Okay, so typically, what do we see? We see that governments all around the world do try to compensate these losers from trade. Okay, and they do try to guarantee a smooth transition for these adversely affected workers. Okay, so we see policies such as extension of unemployment benefits, compensation for wage losses, retraining programs being implemented all over the world to make to try to compensate workers from their losses. And here in the U.S., we have such a program. It's called the Trade Adjustment Assistance. Okay. However, here in the U.S., this program is still very small in scope and not very efficient in compensating the losers, so that perhaps unsurprisingly, we do see lots of these workers hardly affected by trade being very unhappy and getting politically organized to oppose trade. Okay. Now that we have covered, okay, some of the benefits of trade as well as some of the costs of trade, let me talk about China for a little second. Okay, so China represents the single biggest event in international trade in the last 30 years or so. Okay, China becoming a manufacturing superpower is something that excites economists and international trade economists more specifically. Okay, it is very unlikely that we're going to see an emergence of a superpower, of an economic superpower, in such a short amount of period again in our lifetimes. Okay, but it turns out that this very rapid growth of China did lead to disruptions in the U.S. labor market. Okay, and not only in the U.S. but also in the rest of the world. Okay, so again, remember that what I said in a few minutes ago, changes in the trade environment do lead to disruptions in the labor market. And then China is an example of such a big change in the trade environment. Okay, so here's an interesting figure that gives you the idea of the dimension of China in the past 30 years or so. Okay, so here we're looking at U.S. imports from China versus U.S. imports from the rest of the world. Okay, so imports from the rest of the world are given by the dashed line, and imports from China to the U.S. are given by the solid line. Okay, and what we see here, we see that if we anchor the two lines in 2001, we see that between 2010, and this is just 10 years, in the decade, within the decade, US imports from China have grown by 3.5 times, whereas imports from the rest of the world have grown just by 1.5 times. Okay, so China, imports from China have experienced tremendous growth and a lot larger than import growth from other countries in the world. Now, I'm not gonna have time to talk about this. My understanding is that the organizers are going to be sharing some of the slides with you guys. This is a slide trying to understand what is behind such an amazing growth of China in the past 30 years or so. Okay, but I mean, there are many reasons why China grew like China, but I'm going to be skipping this just in the interest of time. Okay. All right, so, but then rather, I'm going to be focusing on what are the consequences of this extraordinary growth in imports from China, specifically on the US labor market. Now, one figure that people like to show is this one, where the dashed line shows manufacturing employment in the US, and the solid line shows imports from China into the US, okay? And what is important to observe here is the first thing is that, well, correlation is not causation, okay? Well, we do see at the same time import penetration from China increasing a lot, and we do see at the same time manufacturing in the US declining, okay? But to keep things into perspective, this is the behavior of employment in manufacturing in the US. Employment in manufacturing in the US has been steadily declining since World War II, okay? So since World War II, the share of employment in manufacturing has gone from about 30%, you know, around the 1940s to about, you know, 12%, okay, in the 2000s. And if you think about, okay, if China has reduced employment in manufacturing in the US, it has been by just a little bit. I mean, it's a small dent right here, okay? So you have to put things into perspective. Is that, so first, this figure does not tell you that trade with China has reduced employment in manufacturing in the US. We're going to be establishing causality in a second. But the other thing is that the magnitude, it tends to be quite small, if anything, if you put things into greater perspective, okay? And the other thing is that we tend to hear that trade with China and other low-income countries have killed manufacturing in the US, but that is not quite right. If you look at production of manufacturing production in the US, I mean, it has slowed down, but it has been steadily increasing, okay? The difference here is that this production, instead of using workers, it is increasingly being automated, right, by robots. Okay, that said, and give me 5 more minutes here. I think I can wrap up in 5 minutes. Let's try to establish causality. There's a very interesting paper by 3 economists, Otter at MIT, Dorn at the University of Zurich, okay, and Hansen at Harvard, who have designed a very interesting empirical design to establish this causality between the emergence of China, the rise of China, okay, and disruptions in labor markets in the US. Okay, so the first thing to notice is that even though China has seen a very large increase in exports to the US, there has been a very large variation across industries, okay? So imports from China into the US have greatly increased in sectors like textiles, apparel, toys, or plastics, sectors that tend to be very, very unskilled labor intensive, okay? But some other sectors, such as transportation materials, cars, or electronics, did not experience such a large increase in import competition from China. Okay. So Orndon and Hansen, they observe this very large variation in industry mixes across US regions as well. I mean, you have regions such as North Carolina, where I am. North Carolina is mostly specialized in furniture, textiles, and apparel. North Carolina faced a big hit in response to the emergence of China as a big international trade player. Other regions such as California, which is much more specialized in electronics and high-tech products, California did not experience such a high import competition coming from China. Okay, so the intuition here is that in the US, you're gonna have regions that are very specialized in textiles and apparel, such as North Carolina. So these regions face very stiff competition from China. We're gonna have regions specialized in electronics and transportation materials, such as California. These regions, such as California, did not experience very stiff competition from China. And you're gonna have regions in the middle with a little bit of apparel and a little bit of transportation and electronics, okay? And these regions face moderate competition from China, okay? And here's a figure sort of plotting this index of how much a region faced import competition from China, okay? And this is a figure in this study by these three authors, Orndon and Hansen. And in here you can see, you know, North Carolina being heavily affected by import competition from China. You know, the darker areas are areas that have industries that face very heavy competition from China. Whereas the lighter regions here, these are regions that are not facing very large import competition from China. And what Orndon and Hansen show is that the darker areas here in this map, they tend to see lower growth of wages. They tend to experience larger increases in unemployment, okay? And also, so they see lower growth of wages, larger increases in unemployment, declines in manufacturing employment, so that the conclusion is that China did contribute to the decline in manufacturing in the US. Well, but again, I want you guys to keep in perspective that the decline in manufacturing in the US has been following a secular trend. China did accelerate this decline in manufacturing, but has been a process underway for many, many years. Let me just conclude with the following, which is that the paper by Orndon and Hansen has usually been used by all of these anti-trade folks in the media, as well as in politically organized groups. But these results don't really tell you that the US as a whole lost from trade with China. Quite the opposite. What these results tell us the methodology just tells us relative effects. It tells us that some regions didn't do as well as other regions, okay? But we cannot say that exposed regions are doing worse, or is it non-exposed regions doing better, okay? So for us to be able to say something about did the US benefit from trade with China or not, we need to impose a little more structure on how we think about that relationship, and we need to estimate an economic model, okay? So Orndon and Hansen, they estimate the cost side of trade with China, but then there's also the benefit side that I was telling you guys at the beginning. And even though not all regions of the US benefited in the same way from trade with China, we do see that in the aggregate, okay, trade with China alone accrued about $250 a year to every American. So that relationship on the whole has been positive, okay? Another interesting piece of evidence comes from Caliendo, Dvorkin, and Paro, who estimate a general equilibrium model with labor market frictions, both across regions and industries. And they actually find that, yes, China did contribute to the loss of about 800,000 jobs in manufacturing, but jobs in other sectors were created, okay? And yes, not everyone in the US benefited the same way from trade, but in the aggregate, the US benefited from that relationship, okay? And then just as a last slide here, I'm gonna be very quick because I'm already out of time, I believe. Let me just say that trade with China has also affected how people vote. Okay, so it affected turnout at the region level. I mean, not surprisingly, because trade with China has affected labor markets all across the United States, but it also affected how they voted. So it really had first order consequences on our electoral system. Okay, so I'm going to stop here. But my understanding is that organizers are going to be sharing with you these slides. And if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the topics covered in the talk, I have here listed a few references for you guys. Thank you all very much.
All right, thank you, Professor Dix-Carneiro, for presenting. If you have time, we have a few questions for you. And as always, everyone else can send me any questions you have through the chat. So someone asked if China isn't the only one to blame for the trends of less employment share, what other bodies can be blamed?
Oh, but here, I mean, I think it's very hard to say, I mean, there's a blame specifically. I think that if you look at this figure, we see that manufacturing employment has been steadily declining for over 70 or 80 years here. And one of the reasons that is happening here is just technology is changing, right? We have, I mean, there are two things happening at the same time. Technology is changing. We can produce more stuff with less workers. So automation here is to blame, if you wish. But also we have, on the other hand, there's a blossoming services sector in the US also absorbing some of these workers in manufacturing. Okay, but the thing that I like to point here is that there's a lot of emphasis on when we talk about trade that the US has been losing this relationship because manufacturing in the US has been declining. Well, that's not totally true. Production in the of manufacturing has not been declining. Okay, it's just that because of technology, we're just using less workers. Okay, and the decline of manufacturing can be dated back to World War II. So China is definitely not responsible for what's happening in this part. Maybe what's happening here. So China might be accelerating some of that decline in manufacturing, but it's a decline that has been that was inevitable, if you wish.
The next question is, as automation increases over the coming decades, do you expect the US share of manufacturing to increase again or decrease?
Well, I mean, the expectation is that it is going to decrease, right? Because automation tends to substitute workers. But the thing is that one thing that people neglect is that automation tends to replace or substitute unskilled workers. Okay, so these guys are going to lose their manufacturing jobs. But on the other hand, automation will tend to complement and increase the income of managers and high-skilled workers in manufacturing. Okay, and because of this phenomenon, it can actually, because it increases the incomes of some groups of people, it can create some jobs elsewhere in the economy, for instance, in services.
Okay. Next question is, how will China's dual circulation policy affect China's share of global low-end manufacturing?
I'm sorry, Sriti, can you say that again?
Yeah. How will China's dual circulation policy affect China's share of global low-end manufacturing?
So what do you mean by dual circulation? It's the hukou system that you mean, or?
I'm not sure. Someone asked me that question. Oh, they said yes. Yeah.
Okay, so the hukou system as opposed to?
The person who asked the question, feel free to just unmute yourself.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, they asked, how will China's dual circulation policy affect China's share of global low-end manufacturing?
Well, the thing is that there has been some recent work actually suggesting that because China became such a large superpower, it had to relocate labor from rural regions to more urban regions. But the hukou system was an impediment for this relocation of labor. And there has been actually some evidence that the emergence of China as an international trade superpower has actually led local governments in China to lift some of these circulation restrictions, allowing China to more fully reap the benefits from that integration. I hope that sort of addresses the question.
Okay. Next question is, how can economists better balance the differences between the widespread benefits of trade and the concentrated downsides of trade?
It's a good question. I think that usually economists, when they talk to policymakers or media outlets, they tend to emphasize, they tend to emphasize the benefit side, but for some reason, let's see here. They tend to emphasize the benefit side, but they don't really emphasize the cost side. I think the best way to go forward as a government promoting trade is to recognize that there are some losers in the economy, okay, and to implement good policies that are somehow able to transfer some of the gains to the losers, so that everyone is better off.
Okay, I'll ask one more question. If current trends continue, do you expect a large share of Americans to move forward towards urban areas for higher skilled jobs?
Oh, this is already happening in the U.S. Yeah, for sure.
Well, thank you again for presenting and speaking with us today. Everyone else, I hope you all learned a lot more about trade and the global marketization and were able to take something meaningful from today's presentation.
Well, thank you all very much. These are great questions. I very much enjoyed discussing some of these issues with you guys. And good luck in the competition.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
The next part is, oh, sorry, I gotta raise my hand.
Go ahead. Do you have a question?
Yeah, like, we'll get our results back in like the 17th, right?
Yes. Wait, we're not done yet, so we'll finish it and then we'll answer any questions you have at the end. Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Alrighty. So at this moment, we're gonna take a group photo. So if you'd like to be in the group photo, I encourage all of you to turn on your cameras. This is just used for promotional materials, and also so that we can make a fun recap video at the end of the competition that all of you can go watch, which will be fun. So we prefer if you turn on your videos. If you don't want to be included in the team photo, just feel free to turn off your camera. But yeah, I'll give you guys a couple minutes or a couple seconds to turn on your cameras and we'll take the photo. Alrighty. For the people who have not turned on the camera, I'm gonna assume that you don't want to be in the photo. I'll give you guys like a couple more seconds. Alrighty. Okay, so the photo is going to happen in two phases. So there's going to be two photos. The first one will be a normal photo, and the second one will be a silly photo. For each photo, it'll take me about 15 to 30 seconds to take each photo. So just kind of do whatever you're going to do for that amount of time. I'll tell you when it ends because I do have to go through all the menus and screenshot everybody. So bear with me. So we'll do two, and I'll count down from 3, and then at 1, I'll take the photo, and there'll be multiple rounds. So just hold that position for like a couple seconds, and I'll tell you when to do it again. Okay. Alrighty. So 3, 2, 1. Oh, actually, hold up. That broke. Give me 1 second. Alrighty. 3, 2, 1. Oh, why didn't it take the photo? All right, I'm gonna try this one more time. Sorry, I'm having some technical issues. My computer's being weird. All right, 3, 2, 1. Bear with me. All right. For the second one, we'll take one more photo, and for this one, feel free to do whatever you want. And yeah, we'll do this one more time. 3, 2, 1. All right. Just hold that. Exciting. All right. Thank you guys so much. We'll move on with the presentation. All right. Congratulations again on finishing the first segment of the EconOlympiad. Now, for the second portion of the competition, you'll be competing in a week-long asynchronous presentation round. Presentations will be scored by our panel of judges, hailing from multiple prestigious institutions, and they each have years of experience working with economics and research. Our first judge is Professor Thomas A. Pugel. Professor Pugel has been on the faculty of New York University, the Stern School of Business, since 1978. Dr. Pugel's research focuses on international industrial competition with an emphasis on market structure, strategy, and performance, and on government policies toward international trade and industry. Additionally, he has served as a research consultant to a number of U.S. government agencies, international organizations, and business organizations. Our second judge is Professor David Arnold. Professor Arnold is a professor at UC San Diego. He received his doctorate from Princeton University in 2020, and a paper of his has appeared in the Quarterly Journal of Economics. Dr. Arnold is a labor economist, and his interests are in industrial organization. His work focuses on an impact of workers due to privatization of state-owned enterprises, as well as the impacts of employment legislation. Our final judge is Professor Lawrence White. Professor White has been with New York University's Leonard N. Stern School of Business for more than 40 years. His primary research areas of interest include financial regulation, antitrust, network industries, international banking, and applied microeconomics. Professor Arnold and Professor White will also be giving their thoughts during a live answer Q&A session during our award ceremony on April 17th. Our judges will be scoring your presentations on 4 distinct categories through a graded rubric. The categories are weighted as follows. 10% of your presentation grade will rely on your thesis, so the opinion and the argument that you're making. 20% of your presentation grade will rely on your evidence. Another 60% of your presentation grade will rely on your reasoning, and a final 10% of your presentation grade will be decided based on your presentational skills and delivery. Example rubrics for the presentation can be found on our website at theyei.org/EconOlympiad, as well as a sample presentation that our resources team has put together. As a reminder, the presentation is 50% of your cumulative EconOlympiad score. The presentation should be between 5 and 10 minutes in length, feature all team members, and should directly answer the prompt. The presentation must be uploaded to the testing portal by April 9th, 11:59 Pacific Daylight Time. So please account for the time the recording takes to upload. Without further ado, the presentation round prompt is: describe your team's ideal system of healthcare. Explain a feasible way to implement it in the United States. So again, it is describe your team's ideal system of healthcare. Explain a feasible way to implement it in the United States. You can find more details and instructions about the presentation and everything we covered today at bit.ly/YEI in all caps present. And it'll also be sent out to you in an email. The testing portal will open in 48 hours. So you won't be able to submit the testing portal for the next 2 days, but once those 2 days are over, we'll send you guys an email with a link to the testing portal. If you have any questions regarding the presentation round, please raise your hand or ask your question in the chat now. Anyone have any questions? Alrighty. If you have any other questions during the presentation round, please feel free to email our events team or resource team at events@theyei.org or ask your question on the YEI Discord. Yes, the submission link to the video. So we have a testing portal. It'll be very similar to the thing that you used today to take the written exam. We'll send you guys the link for that within the next 2 days. Once it is open, there are some things that we're kind of sorting out behind the scenes, but once it's done, we'll send it to you guys. You guys will turn your presentations there. And the presentation should be around 5 to 10 minutes within those 2 time periods. Any other questions before we move on? Alrighty, at this point, Dia will be taking back over and giving you guys some more small details before we wrap up.
Thank you to everyone again for competing at the Youth Economic Initiative's first annual EconOlympiad, and congratulations on finishing day 1 of the competition. I am Dia Jane, one of the event coordinators at the YEI, and I'll be talking about the important dates for the rest of the competition, so be sure to pay attention. There are essentially 3 main parts. Today was the written test. April 9th at 11:59 p.m. PDT is the deadline for the presentations, and we will conclude the competition on the 17th with the award ceremony at 9 a.m. We will also be releasing fun Instagram story challenges throughout the 3 weeks for opportunities to earn up to 5 entries for a raffle for AirPods, so make sure you follow at the.yei on Instagram. Remember, there is a period between the and YEI. So it's the.yei on Instagram. The way the raffle for AirPods works is you have 5 opportunities to enter as 5 tickets. For competing for EconOlympiad, you all received 1 ticket. Now, the next 3 tickets will be given by participating in each of the 3 Instagram challenges, as well as filling out the feedback form at the end of the competition. These Instagram story challenges will be spread across the 3 weeks, as you can see on this calendar. The 3 different challenges are posting a picture of you at Written Round, which is today, completing a bingo, and filling out an EconOlympiad recap template. Please make sure you tag at the .yei to be eligible for the raffle. The feedback form will be emailed to all of you at the end of the award ceremony. We can't wait to see your story posts. So you guys can go ahead and take your selfies now to finish challenge 1. Again, make sure to tag at the .yei.
We'll give you guys 5 minutes to do so.
All right, so now at this time, please raise your hand with the reactions function if you have any questions. For any questions or concerns during the competition itself, please email events@theyei.org or message the EconOlympiad channel in the YEI Discord server. Go ahead, Akshay. Akash, sorry.
My question is, for this raffle, we just take does the picture, like the screenshot we take, have to include anything, like for us at the written round, like right now?
No, you can just take either a selfie of yourself and just write EconOlympiad on it, or use the template, or take a picture of your screen.
Okay, thank you.
And please post this to your Instagram stories. It does not have to be an actual post on your feed. Does anyone have any other questions? If your account is private, that should be all right as long as you tag the YEI account and you follow the YEI account.
Yeah, we will still be able to see your post and we'll mark you down for the raffle.
Mhm. All right, guys. So on behalf of the entire YEI team, I wish you all the best of luck, and we're all excited to see you on the 17th. Thank you for coming.
Thanks so much. We appreciate it. We'll see you guys all in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Thank you.